So a high school English teacher doesn't want to teach proper grammar to her students. Now, this is because this woke lunatic high school teacher, who is tenured, by the way, believe it or not, she believes that using proper grammar is white supremacy. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So a high school English teacher in California claims that she undermines white supremacy in her classroom by teaching students about the exaggeration of the importance of writing rules and grammar usage. This piss-poor excuse for a teacher, Marta Schaefer, teaches at Orville High School, and she began the school year by teaching parts of linguistics as a way of fighting white supremacy in the classes. Now, we found out about this from the wonderful Twitter account Libs of TikTok, who's doing yeoman's work over there and exposing the absolute lunatic left that comes from that other platform. And this teacher is one of them. So Ms. Schaefer said that her goal was to be inclusive of all kinds of ways that we use language. Okay, that's fine. But let's just watch the video.
As an educator, I am constantly worried if I am part of the problem. What do I mean by that? Well, public education is an institution that upholds lots of problematic systems in our society, like white supremacy and misogyny and colonization, etc.
You hear this?
In my role as an educator, I try to undermine that BS in my classroom as much as I possibly can. I teach high school English and whew, the white supremacy runs deep. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at how we write essays. Start with an introduction that includes a thesis. Always cite your sources. Use transition words like however and therefore.
Wait a minute. How is that white supremacy? How is that white supremacy?
They're all made up rules. They're arbitrary. They were created by Westerners in power. In linguistic justice,
Linguistic justice, she calls it. It's probably the name of a book. All right. So she's right, though. Folks, she's right. She is the problem. People like Schaefer are robbing children of an education to satisfy their own warped sense of social justice. Now think about it. In order to feel good about her own leftist woke self, Schaefer is teaching her students that the rules of the English language should not be taken too seriously. Students who take her flawed lessons to heart will have trouble getting a job someday because they can't speak or write the English language up to the proficiency that is demanded from the job they're applying, at least most jobs that pay well. So leftist do-gooders always screw things up because their worldview is completely out of whack with the real world. And people who listen to and follow their advice are worse off for it. According to Schaefer, expecting students to use proper syntax and grammar are made-up rules. They're arbitrary. They were created by Westerners in power in linguistic justice and part of white supremacy that runs deep, adding that she tries to undermine that BS in my classroom as much as I can. What a friggin' lunatic. The English language, like any language, was created as a communication tool. Race was not a factor. Would she ever go that far and say that any language in any country on the continent of Africa is black supremacist language and that it should not be taught properly? Of course not. She'd have to turn in her membership card to the woke supremacy. Isn't it interesting how leftists use today's woke standards to judge everyone and everything from hundreds of years ago? That's because leftists are generally stupid people. They are ideologues. For leftists, everything is political, and they can't help themselves. Let me categorize that. Let me categorize this for the leftists who are watching this. I'm not talking about liberals. I have liberal friends who laugh at people like you, leftists, okay? Schaefer goes on and says, we study linguistics and the rules that we actually use to communicate instead of made-up rules that white supremacy created for when we write papers and stuff, which is what scholars call the language of power. There was no such thing as white supremacy when the English language was created. English is a West Germanic language that originated from languages brought to Britain in the mid-5th or 7th centuries AD by Anglo-Saxon migrants from what is now northwest Germany, southern Denmark, and the Netherlands. This bonehead would probably argue that if you speak Spanish in Spain, that it would be a form of bigotry to those that don't speak it. Does she honestly believe that when the language was first being created, that people sat down in a classroom and argue back and forth over what syntax to use and what would constitute nouns and verbs and conjugations of adverbs and prepositions and everything else that goes with creating a language. This girl's a moron. She's a whack job. I think the school should remove this lunatic. Take away her tenure first, because she's harming her students. Then the school board could easily vote her ass out and throw her out the door and tell her to never come back. You see, tenure is the problem in this sense, because it's bad enough when college professors get tenure because it means you can't be fired, okay? But if I'm paying for college classes and I don't like the professors who are tenured there, I could take my money and go elsewhere. But in a system where your high school is dependent in large part by your zip code, you can't very easily move to another school of your choice. That's why conservatives believe in school choice. I believe tenure in high schools came about because, there's no other reason for it other than you cannot fire a teacher like Schaefer, who went all woke and the wokety woke and is harming her students by teaching them leftist gobbledygook like this. In another video, Schaefer stated that a student codes how they communicate at home or with friends just as important, if not more important, than a boss's expectations of how their employees communicate. Holy crap. This woman never lived in the real world. It was at that point, after that statement, that I realized she's just a fucking idiot. Okay? It may not be a natural way of speaking for the person because they were taught English by people who are themselves ignorant of the language. That doesn't mean that you don't try to get your children a better education. Schaefer says that when she's teaching students of color about linguistics, she said she feels like a cringe white lady. What the hell is that all about? Why? It's probably because she suffers from what I call WLG, which is white leftist guilt. White leftist guilt is an affliction that happens to many woke leftists who think that if they trash their own race, they will not be beaten down by the rest of the members of the woke supremacy in which they all belong to. Okay? She said, did I worry about being a white savior? Absolutely. Was it uncomfortable? Definitely. But a lot of my students come here and they're uncomfortable with the white mainstream culture of public school life. So I think it's good for them to see their teacher deal with linguistic discomfort too. Does that mean that this broad wants students of color to not use or consume the English language and how it was intended to be used? I mean, folks, that's just stupid. That's really stupid. When leftists make claims that testing is unfair, because she said the IQ bell curve in the SATs, that they are racist because the writers of these tests were made up almost entirely of white people, and they still are. So is she saying that it's being unfair to black people and other people of color? Maybe possibly she's unwittingly saying that the people that people like her are trying to appease are not proficient enough in the native language to pass a test that was written in said language. Look, there are no special codes in the English language that only white people were taught. I mean, that's a ridiculous notion by ridiculous people. Okay, so in other words, what do? They wait till the black kids go out to the bathroom and they go, okay, white people, here's the codes. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous on the face of it. Consider this, okay? There are two people who go up for a job. One is a person of color, any size, shape, gender, whatever, okay, who speaks the language adequately. They write English language adequately, okay? And the other person is someone who was taught by Schaefer in her classroom. Now, who do you think is going to get the job? Parents out there of any race, creed, or color. I don't care if you're black, you're brown, you're white, you're Asian. I don't care. Okay, if you want your children to succeed in America, all right, better than you have succeeded, which I assume is all of our dreams for all of our kids, right? Then you will shun this type of stupidity at the outset, because these types of teachers, these woke supremacist jerk-offs, are actually robbing your children of an adequate education. Leftists are destroying our country, our culture, and now it's in the classrooms. And our children, they're destroying, and future generations when they do this. This woman should be shown the door for racism. Yes, I said racism. In her own words, Schaefer declared that the English language is a white supremacist language, which in turn means that people who use it effectively, I guess she's saying white people, according to her own insinuations, that they're all white supremacists. Now, that in itself is the very definition of racism, to attribute a superiority or an inferiority to an entire class of people based on their race. This woman should be fired immediately. Okay, well, that's it. Thanks a lot. Thanks for being with me, and we'll see you in the next one.